I am the Reverend Joel Miller, and I was involved with the congregation, the seeds of this congregation from 1991 until early 1993. And my role was that I showed up to a uh, new parents group. There's a story behind that. The I met two moms at a playground, and I was with my little 6-month-old child, the at-home dad, and I was talking about, how is it for you? It can be kind of lonely, being an at-home parent with an infant child. And they said, well, we're trying to get a play group started, and and we have one dad who would like to be in it, but he's not willing to be in the group unless there's another dad. And I said, another at-home dad? Yeah, sign me up. So I went to this play group at the Union City Library, was where we met. And we were sitting around our small infant children, maybe in arms, maybe just figuring out how to crawl or walk, not even walk. And one of the parents asked me, "So what do you do?" And it could be kind of a loaded question. I'd just been ordained, and sometimes you get on an airplane and somebody says, "What do you do?" And you say, if you're a minister, you might get a confession or you might get a theological argument. But in this case, I wasn't on an airplane. I said, I want to get to know these folks. So I said, well, I'm a minister. The room goes silent and they're all staring at me. I thought, wow, that's interesting. And so somebody said, so what kind? And I said, Unitarian Universalist, and they all gasped. And I thought, oh, I must be in trouble. And they said, no. A couple of us have been talking about how cool it would be if we had a Unitarian Universalist congregation to be a part of. They'd just been thinking about it. I happened to be at the time the chair of the district's extension committee, as it was called. We were thinking about how do we start congregations. So I said, well, let's do it. I can help you with that. And with that, we went from there. That was the moment things got started. I have memories, these wonderful memories. We started worshiping, just getting together on Sunday afternoons, in addition to some weekly meetings about how do we want to get together, how do we get the resources we need, how do we want to attract other people. But we wanted to get together and worship. And there was a Sunday that I'd been holding my son and feeding him before, while his mom had been on an errand. And when she got back, I handed my little baby to her, and I'd been feeding him and put on my jacket, went off to I think it was a school at that point where we were meeting on some Sunday afternoons. And I went up to the front of the gathering. I was going to give a sermon, and a couple of members came up and stopped me, and they said, let's wipe your jacket off first. I had baby barf all the way down the back of my jacket. And just have really great memories of the meetings we had and the excitement we had about how do we want to organize this? How do we want to get some support and resources from the district, as it was at the time, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and really enjoyed getting to know folks like Steve and Kathy, for example. It was really great. If we were going to have put a time capsule together, or looking back, if I were thinking about what would be good in the time capsule, the first thing that came to mind was a pacifier, and maybe even a little barf rag to clean up the back of the preacher's jacket. Yeah, it's maybe include some pictures of the families and all the little children that were a part of that, the seeding of the congregation.
Mm.
There got to be some very important stories about how where have those how have those babies grown up and where are they now? There might be some stories about being in a religious education program, not just as children, but as adults too. Um, the important work that Reverend Barbara has done uh, became a part of the life of the congregation while I was there. She got involved, and work like that. I think about how many lives have been changed, how many lives have been saved. Telling stories like that in a time capsule would be um, that would be something I'd be very interested in seeing later on and in putting in myself if I were doing it. So in 31, 32 years of ministry since I was with Mission Peak, I helped to start a congregation in Littleton, Colorado, the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church. And also lots of children were part of that congregation's beginnings. Um, and while I was there, I had um, a very intense experience with the high school shooting that happened at the Columbine High School. And that was a life-changing event. The role of that congregation in people's lives when that happened was life-saving. It was so important that congregation was there. Just as I know it's so important. Um, the ministry that Mission Peak has done is so important. Since after that, I was 11 years senior minister in Buffalo, New York. I've done 5 interim ministries, everywhere from Oregon to Indiana to Louisiana to New Jersey. And now I'm settled in the last region of the United States I hadn't ever lived in. I'm in New England and serving a congregation just outside of Boston, the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Newton, and co-ministry with my beloved. The congregation, even though I was just there in the seating of the congregation, I loved watching all of the ministry that's happened in and through Mission Peak over the years now. My time with Mission Peak is still very much with me, just the joy and the excitement, the deep commitment of the people willing to invest so much in the seating of a congregation at those 30 plus years ago. My hopes and my blessings for you would be that your ministries continue to have that wonderful effect on lives, that your ministry continues to give you joy, and that whatever new surprises, new discoveries come your way, may they be ones you can embrace with the same joy and gusto that you did when we all first met.
Hi, my name is Barbara Myers. I've been with Mission Peak since it began, actually. I am currently the affiliated community minister. I became affiliated in December of 2004. So now that's, 20 years. So, and I'm happy to be here to be able to talk to you. I first learned about the effort to start what became Mission Peak UU when I was a member of Star King UU in Hayward. And I heard that there were some people that were thinking about starting a church in Fremont. And I thought, I live in Fremont. Of course, there has to be a church in Fremont. I knew it had been so incredibly helpful to me when I was recovering from my mental health difficulties. And as I, started starting the church in Fremont, I began more open to people about what had happened during my serious depression. And and I hadn't really told anybody at the other church about it. And so I was able to tell my story to the folks at Mission Peak, and it was received so wonderfully. A lot of people said, "Me too, me too, me too." So I started a depression support group. And when I started the depression support group, um, I realized after running it for a few years that, gosh, maybe I could do a better job at this if I had taken a pastoral counseling class. And so I called up Star King School for the Ministry, which is a seminary for UU ministers, and asked them if I could audit their class in pastoral care. And they let me do that. But when I was about halfway through that class, I thought, this is what I need to be doing with my life. This is real. This is something that I can do. This is something that's using my own experience as something that's helps others. So by the end of that class, I had submitted my application to Star King School, and at the time, all this time I'd been working full-time as a software engineer for IBM Corporation. So I took a detour from that career path into a very different career path. Never doubted it for a minute. So it was the love and support I got from the members at Mission Peak that led me into this new career.
So
I think I would put in the capsule, I would put in the order of service for my ordination that Mission Peak ordained me. So I would put that in there as a way for them to see the effect that they had on me as a minister. Well, if I had to put in a wish for Mission Peak for 30 years from now, I don't think I'd be around. I'm 77 years old now, so that would be, what, 107? I probably won't be a member here, but my wish for the congregation would be that you are vital and alive and doing good work in the community, and that you can see that what the effect that you have had in the community and realize the importance of this organization. There have been 4 people who have started in this congregation as lay people and have become UU ministers. There's Carol Rudisil, and next was me, and then there was Becky Gunn, and then there was Robert Jensen, who now calls himself Alex Jensen. And so you are a congregation that has birthed UU ministers. Thank you for being the congregation that helped me launch my ministry. And I wish the best for you in the future.
Hello, Mission Peak. It has been too many years. I am Reverend Dr. Kate Walker. When I knew you, of course, so many years ago, I was just Kate Walker, none of all those fancy titles. And you all were critical in helping me in formation in becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister. And my gratitude goes as deep as the roots of my ministry. I'm actually beginning my 27th year of ministry in my 3rd congregation. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania now, serving the First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh. And I always count Mission Peak as the first church that I was able to serve as your director of religious education. I believe I was the first one in that role, and I have so many wonderful memories, and particularly of the dedication of so many of your members as you began this brand new ministry in the Fremont area. And particularly my colleagues, Carol Rudisil and Barbara Myers, but I remember Jean Jones and Ben Baruch and Steve and Janet, all extraordinary people. And we created together religious education programming. We brought in teachers for the children, and their children were everywhere. We were renting space in a school, and we had to set it up every Sunday or for any special events and pull things out of closets and distribute them throughout the classrooms. And it was wonderful, crafting this every Sunday, the mission and the vision of an extraordinary group of people. So many, many congratulations, and I am thrilled to know that you have survived and thrived and grown and prospered through all these years. And you will always be within my heart and my roots of ministry. And I'm so glad that we have actually grown, both of us, in our commitment to Unitarian Universalism. And I look forward to being in your midst again, perhaps one day soon. All my love and many of my congratulations. Bye-bye.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Reverend Ben Myers. I'm so happy to be a part of this great milestone in the history of this congregation. I had the honor of serving Mission Peak before it was even Mission Peak, before we had the name. Of course, the blessing that was bestowed on me was being ordained by the Fremont congregation, which then became Mission Peak. And there's no greater blessing than could be given any minister than that. I want to say early on, what I remember most is that we were able to create a safe place for youth. And I remember even in those early years, our commitment to religious education, to children's programming, but particularly youth, the way they were incorporated into worship and music and every aspect of social justice. And that, I think that was created such a solid grounding for those young people. We began in a sandbox. We started meeting in a old school auditorium, and we had a vision of one day owning our own campus. I think that type of forward thinking and that vision, I would want to remind people of humble beginnings, but grand vision. Since leaving Mission Peak, I had the opportunity to serve the Trust for Public Land for over 12 years, which is the second largest land conservation organization. And it really deepened my sense of environmental justice before returning to parish work at the Berkeley Fellowship for many years at San Mateo. And now I continue my ministry to smaller congregations the way I started it. I think symbolically, I would place a compass, which is something that we often give youth when they go out into the world. But I think having a compass is just a tangible reminder of looking for our true north or our path. So I would want to remind them of forward looking and the journey that they will continue to be on, and how what they do now affects who they will become and where they're going. Well, my blessing would be the blessing that I used at the end of every worship service, which was, as you leave this place in the presence of one another, may love be your guide and courage your companion, and may joy greet you at every turn. May you seek health and wholeness in all things, and exercise the generosity of substance and spirit in all that you do. And may the truth always come easily to your lips, even in this world that is often fearful and fractured and false. So despite this, strive to be happy, but remain unsatisfied until this world is made more fair and all her people won by what we do or leave undone. Go in peace, with grace and gratitude, and always return again and again in love. Amen.
So I'm Reverend Howard Dana, and hello, Mission Peak. I was with you all just 1 year, and that was 1999 and 2000. And my role was as your minister, and you had a transition from your first minister, and you needed a minister and I needed a job, and I think we needed each other. And so we spent a really delightful year together. And both grew in our own way. Well, it was the first year of ministry for me that wasn't my internship. And my experience of it was that I was living in Oakland, taking the BART down to Fremont, and then bicycling over to that funny old school building where the church was meeting, and holding worship there and meeting with people, and going out for lunch at a decent Chinese restaurant that was there. And so it was an odd year for me because I was in search for a permanent position. But I also knew that the work that I was doing was really appreciated. And I think that what I appreciated most was that there was steady leadership in the congregation, and that leadership met my leadership. I don't think any of us had any grand plans for the year other than to just survive, to just get through it, to move along. In those days, there was often a search committee put together in the 1-year interim, and that was the case. And that resulted in a very successful search. So our year of interim together really was partly healing, partly just being steady, and partly looking to the future. That would probably be an order of service, because I think that I was the first minister that they experienced who just said, no, most weeks we're going to do it like this, because you need some things that happen every week. You're not going to be here every single week, but we're going to do a few things each week that are the same. And I think because they were a new congregation, they were not really used to somebody coming in with as much church experience as I had, just knowing that a certain amount of repetition and a certain amount of structure was going to really be helpful for all of us. So I would put an order of service that didn't change much from week to week in the time capsule. I also knew that if they didn't like that, I was just staying around for only a year, and they could go back to whatever they wanted after I'd left. Let me tell you the funny story. So one of the funniest things that happened at Mission Peak was that very first fall, the lay leaders came to me and they said, you know, every year we do a communion service in the fall, and it comes around Thanksgiving, and we think the congregation would really appreciate having a communion service. And I thought to myself, well, okay, you know, they're new, and you know, we appreciate lots of different religions. And so I said, well, let's plan it. I don't remember which Sunday it was in Thanksgiving in November, and I just went about and sort of planned a communion service. You know, it was very UU, and people showed up on Sunday morning, and there was a white cloth on the table up front, and there was some nice home-baked bread there, and there was a little pitcher of grape juice, and we were all set. So we went on with the service, and there were some Christian references, and there were some other references, and then we got down to the story of how Jesus, during his last meal with his friends, said some words and blessed them, and I took the bread, and we all dipped it in the grape juice and ate it. And then the service was over. And somebody came up to me after the service and they said, that was really interesting. She said, usually we have, it's a cornbread and apple cider communion that we usually do at Thanksgiving time. But this was really different. So thank you for doing it. And it was then that I realized that I just hadn't asked any questions about this, and there was a misunderstanding about what communion was. And growing up liberal Presbyterian, I had one idea of it, and the congregation had an entirely different idea of it. But the best thing about it was they were all very good sports. We laughed about it afterwards, and so communion was held at least once at Mission Peak in the Christian fashion. Yeah, so during my year with Mission Peak, I successfully landed a ministry in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and that went on for 13 years and was successful and adventurous and all of that kind of stuff. From there, I went to First Parish in Concord, Massachusetts for 9 years. That was a large church with adults and children, kind of at the height of it pre-COVID. We were about 1,000 people, so a big complex system and an old congregation. And then after we got through COVID and I've had a couple of years of rest, I've just started as the minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I have just a 1-year contract, and we'll see how it goes. I suppose the other thing that I did in that time, I was on the Ministerial Fellowship Committee for 8 years and was its vice chair for 8 years. and I did some international work with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. Congratulations on your 30 years, and you have 30 more, and 30 after that, and 30 after that. Just continue reaching out to your community, reaching out to the people who live in your area, who are seeking an open-hearted, warm place to be religious. That's not putting them in any kinds of boxes. So just keep doing that, keep reaching out, trust that you will grow, trust that your message is needed in this world, and that I love you and other people love you, and we want to see you in another 30 years.
I'm Chris Schreiner. I'm the Minister Emeritus at Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and I was called as their settled minister in 2000, continued as settled minister until 2008, then stayed away from the congregation for a while, for a couple of years, while people got used to me not being the one they asked about ministerial matters, and then returned, and I've been enjoying very much being a member of the congregation since that time. So during my time as settled minister, things began with some level of stress and difficulty because there had been some problems in the congregation that had actually led some people to think maybe we should just dissolve this whole organization. We hadn't been around very long as a congregation, and there was the question about whether the congregation was really even viable. And fortunately, by the time I got here, the Reverend Howard Dana had been the interim minister. He came just before me, and he had done some excellent work helping heal congregational hurts and get people on a more solid footing again. So I didn't really have to start with square one. It was still a little stressful, and of course I had just changed jobs, changed locations, and gotten married all about the same time. So so there were a lot of changes in my life, but it worked out. And there was really a lot of pent up energy in the congregation, and so there was the development of pastoral associates, worship associates, and a few years later, small group ministries. All those things were very helpful. It was easier to maintain some of those things when the congregation was larger, but it was really a marvelous time. There was significant congregational growth, and that was not always easy because we were in a situation where the usual demographics that UUism appeals to were declining in the area, as if the area was shrinking. And we hadn't really figured out how to reach out to a lot of the folks who were coming in who were not part of that standard demographic that we were accustomed to. And we're still having some trouble with that, of course. It's not easy, but we did all right. And then we had another crisis when we lost our lease and just about had to go to a terribly inappropriate setting for our Sunday services. And then just in the nick of time, somebody at the Methodist Church who knew of us and liked us suggested that we might connect up there, and we did. And it's been wonderful since at Cole Hall on Palm Hill. You know, at first I wasn't sure at all what to say about a time capsule. It's just not the kind of thing I think about very much. But then suddenly it just dawned on me, we have some great T-shirts, and this is one of them that's really fabulous. It just says it's so beautiful, and it sums up so much about what the congregation is all about. And I would be willing to sacrifice that for a time capsule if there were such a thing. That this congregation really cares and really does things, caring hearts, open minds, and also lots of times we add helping hands. After I returned to Mission Peak after being away for a couple of years during the interim ministry period from around 2008 plus a couple of years, I have been focusing very much on academic philosophy. It's been actually a passion of mine for, at this point, about 30 years, and not something that's very easy to pursue, very challenging, involves just a lot of complications, and it's very, very time consuming and sometimes kind of exhausting. But that it's going reasonably well. I did self-publish a book on philosophy of mind, consciousness studies, a few years ago, and now I've had 3 articles published in an academic journal, and so I'm really pleased with that. I'm hoping, however, that before too awfully long, I will have wrapped up the philosophical works officially, so that I can do a lot of other things in my life that have been put on hold, including the possibility of being more involved with Mission Peak, which I would like very much. When I think about what sort of blessing I would give to this congregation as it is now, and as it potentially will be for many years to come, I think of the fact that love has been a theme here in our congregation and in the UUA as a whole. The first sentence of our mission statement says, "The foundation of Mission Peak is love." And recently, of course, at the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, there was a new statement of purpose adopted that placed love right at the very center. And I've been a little critical at some points about using the word love in this way, because there's a time-honored tradition that I'm not terribly fond of in religion, of coming up with some verbal formulation that everybody either is attracted to because they like those words, or they are kind of forced to like those words. And so there's this artificial cultivation of agreement where we like this set of words, therefore we all agree. Now, a Unitarian Universalism, of course, doesn't need that approach. We are what I like to think of as a living laboratory of unity in diversity. And so I would assume that if we take that word love and unpack it, there'll be a lot of different ideas there about what love means. But what I would leave as a benediction and a blessing for this congregation is, may you know love. May you know love in many ways and many levels and many possibilities and many interpretations. And you may you know love ever deeper, forever. Amen.
Greetings to all of you, members and friends of the Mission Peak congregation. I remember you fondly. I remember much of what we did together and the fun we had together when I was there for 2 years, from 2008 to 2010. Seems like a lifetime ago, or several lifetimes ago. There were several things that we worked on together that I remember very vividly. We worked a lot on the structure of committees. We worked for instance, to strengthen the adult education program, on ways to integrate new members into the congregation, on new creative ways to fund the congregation's activities, new ways of doing the annual fund drive and other fundraising. We worked to enhance the worship space. The stage in Cole Hall was demolished to make better, more aesthetic and more flexible worship space. And it made a big difference, I think, in terms of the feeling of being in the building. I remember us holding 2 committee fairs, one each year that I was there, where we had representation from each committee all around the perimeter. And we bragged about the committee's work and what they were doing and who they were. And that was also a recruitment tactic, but it worked on many levels. And that told me what an active congregation you have been. and were at that time very much so. Even though you were small, there's a lot you accomplished. I remember doing several kinds of workshops. I did a visioning workshop, a leadership development workshop, and I held many small cottage meetings, all of it in pursuit of interim ministry to surface concerns as well as hopes and dreams. And participation at these events was always very high, which was quite gratifying for an interim minister. Concerns during those workshops and cottage meetings were lifted up about things like financial solvency and volunteer burnout. And of course, that happens especially with a small but active congregation. And many of you expressed desires for the future, especially having your own space one day, or at least some of you expressed the desire to at least have the exclusive use of the building that you're in. Remember that coming up. I found you to be a congregation with a very, very strong sense of community and very committed members. There was some conflict that I found as we interim ministers especially look for, but it was at pretty low levels by the time I was there. Now, I was asked to think about a symbol since you're going to be doing a time capsule, putting a time capsule together. If I were doing a time capsule with you, this is one object I would contribute. A mirror. I don't know what it looks like on the screen, but as an interim, I showed you a mirror at the very beginning of my time there, and indicated that that's a lot of what an interim does, is to show you who you are, to do some workshops and other kinds of ways of bringing forward your own image of yourselves. And I think a mirror would be a way for you all to remind yourselves who you are periodically, and to assess and evaluate where you've gone and where you hope to go. So I would love to be around to see you 30 more years from now. That's not likely, but the congregation I suspect will endure for that many and many more years. I wanted to just update you on where I went after I left you very quickly. I went to Tucson, Arizona for 2 years, Arcata, California, and the Berkeley Fellowship for 1 year each, then to Hayward, right close to you, for 2 years. And then I finished up my interim work in Marin after 2 more years. So I retired in 2018. And then in 2022, I moved from my long-term home in Berkeley, where I commuted to see you, to Beaverton, Oregon, to be closer to my son, my daughter-in-law, and my 2 grandchildren. In closing, I want to offer you these words of a blessing. May your concerns and challenges be light, and your dreams of ongoing community be strong. May you continue to be there for each other and for the strangers who find their ways to your doors, looking for the gift of community and love that you can and will offer them.
Well, hello, all my old friends and family there at Mission Peak UU. I miss you all so much. I wish I could be there to share this really exciting moment with all of you. 30 years is just a special thing, and definitely worth pausing and stopping and looking backwards a little bit so that we can look forward with a new kind of energy. So if we start at the beginning of my time, we got a name that I was your second choice. That's just how it is sometimes, you know, sometimes you end up with your second choice. And I have to say, I don't think it slowed us down at all. I think we really hit it off and connected. And, you know, the search committee that brought me, I thought was just full of people who really understood this community. I have no doubt that whoever that first choice was would have been great for you too, but I'm really glad it worked out for us. And it's kind of just been an important thing for me to remember in life from that is, you always have these dreams about how things will start, and it's usually perfect, right? You're a first choice and everything just falls together so easily. Uh, Sometimes that happens, I'm sure. It's so far never happened to me, but beautiful, magical things can happen from plan B and probably C, D, E, and all those other ones too. So I'm glad that the chance opened up for me one way or the other. I thought this was my first ministry, remember, that I was supposed to do everything, that it was really on me to figure everything out and to be the engine of energy behind it. And when my ministry really took off at Mission Peak, it was when I realized that was totally wrong, and that it was really about understanding where the energy already was within our community and how I could help set that free and, let it just express itself in a more full form than it had. So I think a couple things that come to mind in terms of the things I'm most proud of my time with all you. The first is the Peak Rocks, which was, just I think so much fun for myself and for the band themselves and for the community. And I will always just remember Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog that they played at my ordination, and so many other hits that they brought to our Sunday services so fondly. The other one that is probably maybe even a better example of that was the garden project that we were able to do in the Tri-Cities, where there had been a garden at Mission Peak for a long time. You all love the earth and getting your fingers dirty and having a beautiful harvest to share with each other, and discerned that we could do more with that, and found a piece of property and rehabilitated it, and suddenly just beautiful things were growing out of there. We hosted events over there. We shared vegetables with people who needed them and ourselves. And it really just felt like an incredible extension of who you all were. And so that lesson of, really understanding leadership as being someone who can help set other people on fire or help boost up the energy that's already there, rather than thinking you're the person in front who has to push and pull and all that stuff, has just been really important for me in terms of how I work with people, how I work with community, and how I approach the work that I still do. So I'm really grateful, for what I learned from all of you. And I hope you are still grateful for the time we spent together, both helping me figure those things out and some of the beautiful successes we all experienced together. And so I don't know what the right object would be to put in there, because maybe one of the things I just love seeing still on Facebook is the kids growing up who were so young when I was there, or maybe in beginning of adolescence. And I just think we as a congregation, because you all focused on family so much, did some amazing service for kids with, the coming of age program, with the sexuality programming that is just some of the best. The OWL program being one of I think the most important things that kids can experience as they're growing up. So maybe some artifacts, some of those forbidden artifacts from the OWL program, and it would be fun to pull out. And I have a 13-year-old daughter now, so she was born about a year after I joined you all, and you helped me welcome her into this world and support my family as they grew. So to me, that's just a huge part of the Mission Peak I know, is just really supportive of families, and that's no small thing in 2024. And I hope that's a ministry you're all still committed to. When I left Mission Peak, I was ready to start a new project, and I really wanted to be more entrepreneurial than I found ministry to be. We started as a spiritual community in virtual reality, with just that large, name, spiritual community, kind of whatever that meant in virtual reality. And I started hosting live events and get-togethers where, people put on headsets and they all went into other worlds, and we made avatars of our bodies and we got together. And some of it really took off, especially around meditation. And one of the things that I learned with you all and continue to do better at too is following the energy. And so a lot of what we were doing started to drop away, and we really started to focus on meditation in virtual reality. And it became a really big thing. We had 1 year over 40,000 people join us from different countries in the world. I think it was over 45 different countries in the world who joined us in these spaces and experienced live meditation. I did that for about 5 years, and then we were so successful, the pandemic being actually a huge positive part of that experience, because lots of people discovered VR during the pandemic and were anxious. They wanted social experiences, and they wanted meditation. We were able to provide both. And at the end of the pandemic, we were actually acquired by kind of the leading wellness app in virtual reality called Trip. We had been called Evolver. And so for the last 2 years, 2.5 years now, I've been working at Trip as their VP of live events in the metaverse. And so I continue to grow this community in virtual reality, as well as lots of live events in real life. I will be starting a course in the fall in psychedelic assisted therapy, which is somewhat of an extension of the work I'm doing with Trip, and also just a really interesting area that I want to learn more about. So the journey continues, and I really just feel grateful for the learnings that came from all of you that got me here. So thank you for that. I understand you all have cake. This is one of the reasons that I wish I could be with you in real life, so that I could enjoy a delicious piece of this 30-year cake with you all. You deserve it. This is not an easy thing to go from a congregation that did not exist. And I remember all the stories about the parties that you all got together more than 30 years ago, to start this process. And that first day when the book was signed, I know our awesome colleague, Reverend Barbara, has been just a huge part of this from day one. You are so lucky to have her. What I'm trying to say is I'm just so darn proud of you all. So excited for what the next 30 years looks like for this congregation, and just send all my love from afar. I hope to see you sometime soon. Bye for now.
Okay. Well, I'm now Reverend Alex Jensen. I am the senior minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Grand Traverse in Traverse City, Michigan. And I believe I was involved at Mission Peak all the way back in 2008, up until I graduated high school in 2014. So I believe I joined Mission Peak as a 12-year-old, or right around that time, feeling really drawn and inspired with what Mission Peak had to offer in terms of spiritual community. And that's really true. As a 12-year-old joining a congregation, I very much didn't really know what I was doing, but I had this deep kernel of something that was calling out to me. And being in middle school and junior high, around that time, there was a period of being invited to a lot of other friends' church services or youth groups. And so I think there was a natural question that was opening up for me. And I remember when I first walked in the door at Mission Peak, and my parents at that time both have since joined the congregation, but I remember early off telling them that I had this interest in going to church, and I think at first they were quite reluctant, and so they were agreeing to drop me off and allow me to go to services, but that that might be just kind of my kind of thing, being your typical unchurched family. But I remember the first couple of times that I walked in the door and really just being struck with how warm and welcoming they were, even to a 12-year-old at the time. I mean, I was taken so seriously, and I was just listened to. People were friendly, were warm. So I think I had kind of some undiscovered hopes at the time of finding a church community that really lived a spirit of love, and feeling like I couldn't quite find that in all the other circles that I was encountering. This conditional sense of love that I first felt in a lot of spaces that said, yeah, we love you, but here are all these things that you really have to do in order to keep being worthy of that. And just none of that was in the room when I walked in. It was just very clearly, whoever you are, you're truly welcome to be yourself here, even a 12-year-old. Mission Peak has been such a big part of my life. It's funny being asked to be on this video, kind of answering these questions. I've actually found myself earlier, even in the coming weeks, really or in the past weeks, really reflecting on my time there, and really feeling kind of a yearning for that community again, that like, oh, I miss those good people, and what a pivotal time that was for me. Yeah, I mean, Mission Peak was such a huge part of my youth development. I mean, I especially just have appreciated the ways that Mission Peak has always been a spiritual home away from home that I can always return to. But yeah, the pivotal moments, I mean, the reason I am who I am, the reason I'm into ministry, you know, I have to give credit to Jeremy Nickel, my first real minister who just really took me seriously and was there. And I have to give big credit to Mission Peak UU for making me feel so welcomed and included. And that definitely led down a path of, you know, of me discovering that ministry was what I was feeling called to, and that was something that I should really take seriously. And it led to my coordination with First Parish in Wayland and having folks from Mission Peak join in that. So, I mean, Mission Peak, I would not be where I am right now here in Traverse City. I don't think I would be nearly as far along in my life and in the healthy place that I am in my life without all the wonderful, positive messages of love, of acceptance that Mission Peak really gave to me, both for my life and for the ministry that I'm doing. So I mean, there's much more that can be said about that, but Mission Peak really did save my life. I feel like Mission Peak saved me, and that's something I still carry today. I recently was reflecting on my time at Mission Peak with also the monthly theme for the Soul Matters theme of invitation. And one of the exercises is actually to do a kind of an adult level version of a credo statement. Well, it turns out, you know, in my time there at Mission Peak, I not only did the coming of age program and wrote a credo, but Mission Peak UU invited me to actually give what I would call my first sermon back in 2011, where during a youth service, I was the only youth doing coming of age at the time at Mission Peak. And they allowed me to have basically a 20-minute slot to explore what I think and what I believe. And I actually came upon this within this past week, and it's actually still on the Mission Peak UU website back from that time. And you know, in some ways, it was kind of a, oh my gosh, like, you know, there's a time capsule of me back then. I'm a little embarrassed that that's even, you know, up, all these, you know, writings. But I think the thing that I point to, you know, so for me, my answer might be finding my own credo that I gave back in 2011 in this time capsule. But it's not just because of what I wrote or shared or it being about me. It's really about the radical and cool thing that it is that you invite youth to share and think what they do and believe, and that kind of exploration is taken just so seriously. I feel like Mission Peak UU has a unique openness, curiosity, flexibility in their DNA with how they welcome people of all different spiritualities to really bring that there and really explore that. And as a teenager, I really felt that sense, even only being there a couple of years. I mean, it was just incredible to me that way. So yeah, I think from my time at Mission Peak, I would probably find my credo statement from 2011, which is still up on the website. And I think I look at that as just such a cool symbol of all that Mission Peak is and the ways that they value youth and exploration for people of all ages too. A lot has happened for me since leaving Mission Peak as a high schooler. I went away to college in Monterey. I graduated. I then went off to seminary at Harvard Divinity School, where I also graduated. I completed my first internship, my first steps into ministry over in Wayland, Massachusetts. I got ordained as a minister. I then moved here to Traverse City, Michigan, started my first job, my first role as a senior minister. I adopted a cat. I moved and found a house. I got married now this year. So there's been a lot of change since I was involved there, and yet the touchstones that I still carry from my time there. It's funny how much you really do miss your home congregation in a way. And I think I just, oh my gosh, I'm getting teary. Like that community has meant so much to me for so much of my life. So I really want to invite Mission Peak to continue to be the radical kind of community, even radical among UU congregations that it is, the place that people do come and just feel completely welcome to be their full self. And I want to invite Mission Peak to continue being the place where people continue to gather, and there's no nonsense about it. It's not for, ego, it's not for personal gain, but we're here for one another. We're here to serve and serve something larger than ourselves. I really want to wish Mission Peak well, to bless them in continuing to be that, because that special magic that Mission Peak has to be a community like that does congregational community in such a unique and special way, really does change lives. And my life is forever changed from the ways that Mission Peak has been a part of my journey. And I know that there are many more after me that you will continue to inspire, and you will continue to change, and you will continue to save by virtue of you just being yourselves. So just don't forget who you are and the power and impact that has. I would really challenge Mission Peak to be bold and to not be afraid. I think there's often a feeling of we don't want to bother other people with what we believe or what we do, or be too in front of everybody, because that sometimes feels like a scary place to be. But quite honestly, I've been really inspired, especially in my time as a teenager with Mission Peak, in the ways that I saw individuals really going out there and living their faith and pointing back to Mission Peak as a place that's where they get their spiritual fulfillment, and that they do what they do because they are Unitarian Universalists. So I think that's my overall challenge, is that it can be scary sometimes venturing into that territory, but it's so needed and so important that we continue to show up and be there, and not just be between our four walls up there in Cole Hall. I think that's really the thing that I would challenge, that, be the radical place that you have been all this time, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to show up, to go places, to invite others in, to take up space as a community that has a lot to offer, because you seriously do have so much to offer. So don't be afraid. There's just so much else that you have to offer that so many other communities can't even offer. And Mission Peak just does it so beautifully. But yeah, we can get in our own ways sometimes, and I think that's in essence what I think Mission Peak might need in terms of a challenge right now, is the challenge to be bold, the challenge to be unafraid, and to continue to show up and be present.
Well, hello. I'm Sonia Sukowski. I served the Mission Peak congregation when Jeremy was at the end of his time with you as a sabbatical minister for a couple of months. I was also serving the UU Fellowship of Tuolumne County in Sonora. I finished my time with them in 2020. I've also done some more sabbatical ministries, one in Chico, one with the San Francisco congregation earlier this year. When I first came to Mission Peak, I had heard about it through a very dynamic lay leader who was involved in partner church efforts. And Pat Rogers' favorite motto was, you can burn the candle from both ends if you hold it sideways. And I was really, really impressed with the music possibilities. You guys had a house band. Do you still have the house band going? So that was super fun to work with them. We had a fairly creative Christmas or holiday service. I remember the Martin Luther King service with the Methodists next door, which was really fun. It was just very fun getting to know you and getting to create worship together in new ways because of all the folks involved and the cool things that you were doing. Let's see, if I had anything to put in a times capsule today, I almost feel like many of us have this sense of our culture and our institutions having a phoenix moment. Like a lot of stuff came tumbling down during COVID, and there are some ashes. I think it's been a pretty big time for strong, smart, powerful African American women in our denomination and in our country. And right now, of course, we're seeing Kamala Harris come, a local, come to one of the highest positions in the land with such grace and tenacity and deep understanding of where we are and where we need to go. And I think that's true as well for Sophia Betancourt. I hope that each of your involvement feels like doing something you're good at or you're passionate about or you want to learn more about and be involved in, and that it feels like a blessing every time you come together and create something together in a larger sense that none of you could create by yourself.
Hi, Mission Peak people. It's so good to see you all. This is Reverend Joe Green. I was your interim minister from, I think it was 2018 to 2020. And it was delightful to be with all of you. I have such wonderful memories of all of you. And so I think it's wonderful that you're celebrating 30 years. When I was there, when I first arrived, if you'll all recall, I moved from Pennsylvania to the Bay Area, but I moved and my cat moved, but the rest of my stuff did not move. And everyone there was so kind and loaned me a cot to sleep on, a pot and a pan and a dish and, utensils so that I could at least live in the apartment I'd gotten until my things arrived. And that's what I remember about this congregation was how kind you all were to me. And I know that when I first arrived, you had been going through a hard time. And I came there, and in some ways, I played a role as a chaplain to help get over some of the hurts that I discovered that you seem to have. And that was the beginning. And then I stayed for 2 years. Right now, I'm the affiliate minister at the UU congregation in Santa Clarita, and I preach there once or twice a month. An at-large board member on the Alternatives to Violence Project. That's my life right now. Time capsules are such interesting things. I would imagine at the very beginning, you were putting in pictures of places that your congregation would meet, committees that would be formed to help the world, religious education to engage children in Unitarian Universalism. That's the kind of folks I see you being. It's not so much things as it is how you can make the world a better place. For a future time capsule, I see Mission Peak putting in a lot of love, a lot of social justice, and a lot of people. And I could see this congregation growing and putting in place some of their heartfelt things that they want to see happening in the world. And so I just see a bright sun in your future. My wish for you, Mission Peak, is that you continue to do the work that you're doing and get to know other people in the community so that they know who you are. Because sometimes I think as Unitarian Universalists, they don't know who we are. And I really do hope that other people in Fremont and in the Bay Area can get to know you and to know what Unitarian Universalism is.
Hello, MPUUC. I'm Jim McKinley, and I was your sabbatical minister during Greg's sabbatical this last fall, October through January, mid-January of this year. So we only got to spend those 4 months together, and the notion was that I was going to be serving you as your sabbatical minister. But what I want you to know is that in a very real way, you served me. I came away from that. You affirmed me in ways that made me feel good and positive and able to move in the world with a real sense of confidence and giving back. I would say you even renewed my faith in Unitarian Universalism. I got to experience ministry where I never had to worry about you. I never had to worry about whether you cared or loved other people. And as I say that, it's thanking you and all these people for all these 30 years, sharing that space with you and that experience. And then my life has changed. After I left Mission Peak in January, I flew out and flew home. And then in March, I went Costa Rica and stayed in a hostel about a block from the beach so I could walk and paddleboard surf down there every day for a whole month. And then at the end of the summer, I came up and have been farm sitting a farm just south of Corvallis for the last month for a friend. And so I'd be close to Hannah in Portland, close enough, and I've seen her. And I was only an hour and 15 minutes from the coast, and I got to drive over there, I don't know, 6, 8 times and brave the cold water and have a great time surfing. So, okay, I would put 2 things in a time capsule. I would put the quote by Margaret Mead that's so familiar to all of us. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, or I think it may be volunteers, can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that's because that's who you are and that's what you're doing. And then it also reminds you of how to be going forward. And then the second thing I'd put in would be a chalice with the interlocking rings. And that would be because we worked with that, and it means so much as a compass to our faith. And that's your blessing that I carry with me. And I'm so full, and I thank you. Thank you, Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Thank you, friends.